One. All right. So, back for some more stories, huh? It's Sunday, June 14th. Hope everyone had a nice Shabbos. On Shabbos, I was reading some different inyanim about seeing the face of a tzaddik. In Hasidic teachings, it's considered a very holy thing and a very beneficial thing to a person to be able to see the face of a tzaddik. I read a story about a guy, not this one that we're going to tell, but just as a preface to the story because it's all kind of connected. There was a guy who was very sick. He had a sickness in his head, like buzzing, like constant buzzing, and something in his head that was driving him nuts. And he went to all these different medical professionals in different places like that, and they were not able to help. And somebody told him to go to this certain tzaddik of Alisk or something. It's called. He was called the tzaddik of Alisk. And he's like, okay, I'll go, whatever. And as he already got into the town, and he just saw the tzaddik for the first time, the pain in his head already started to go away. And as he spent Shabbos with this tzaddik and seeing him more and more, the pain completely went away, and he was completely healed. And I think that they asked the tzaddik about it, or the tzaddik was telling him. He said that this guy came all the way from Egypt. He was in Egypt, and he came all the way to Poland or the Ukraine, wherever this tzaddik was, I'm assuming back then. And he said that Hashem puts people all over the world, and sometimes he gives them certain sufferings so that they have to go to the tzaddik. And because otherwise they wouldn't go to the tzaddik. So Hashem puts something in their life that makes them have to go to the tzaddik wherever he is. And therefore, this guy was healed, and there's definitely an inyan of seeing the face of the tzaddik. In regards to that also as well, Rabbi Nachman talks about in the end of Chaim Moran, there's a piece in Chaim Moran where Rabbi Nachman talks about the great kibbutz HaKadosh. We're going to talk a little bit about Uman in this video, also at the end. But also he talks about how his Hasidim came to be and the gathering of people. So it's very interesting to note and to see, just in the last 10-15 years, there's been a huge increase of people getting into Hasidus, Breslov, Chabad, whatever, all types of Hasidus. Not only Breslov and Chabad, but everything, but a lot of Breslov and a lot of Chabad. And Rabbi Nachman talks about, he said that the mashal to explain this, he says, is that there is a very big bird who lays a huge amount of eggs, and all the eggs cannot fit into this bird's nest. So what he does is that he goes into other birds' nests, and they lay the eggs there. And those birds, they don't know that those eggs are not there, so they just take care of them. And then later on, after those eggs hatch, and the birds are young and whatever, still in the nest, so the other bird, this main bird that laid all these eggs, starts flying around and chirping, and these kids and these birds know when they hear this chirping that it's really their mother. And then they all start flying towards the mother. So that's what Rabbi Nachman says also is the same thing about the inyanim of how Hasidim come to him, is the same thing. He's like, there's different souls that are all over the place, and they're meant to be by, with me, but they're not ready yet. So we have to, when the time is right, they become ready, and then we call out to them. I call out to them in whatever's way, that he does that. Everybody has their story of how they got to Chassidus. Everybody has their story of how they got to Rabbi Nachman. The stories are incredible. Maybe one day we'll tell some stories. Maybe I'll tell my story of how I got there one day. There's different inyanim of how everybody goes to the tzaddik. So this story is also about a guy who was trying to travel to the tzaddik, specifically the Baal Shem Tov. So this is a very simple Baal Shem Tov story. So let's read it. So it says over here, there's also, again, Sefer Kisei Rabbi Shmuel. Love that Sefer. A lot of stories in the back. of all different types of tzaddikim and big rebbes and everything like that. So he says, Shamati me'echad me'at she'shomenu. Look on the screen, this is the story, the first part of the story. He says that I heard, this guy again, Rav Shmuel Horowitz heard, that from one of the Chassidim in Breslov, that said that he knew and he saw this old man who used to lay down in the shul next to the oven, which is called a rive in Yiddish, I guess, in the parentheses. And he was always groaning and crying, and that's what he did. There's this old guy laying down, and he was just crying and groaning all the time. And this Breslov guy saw this, and there was a kid there, and who asked him, "Why are you groaning so much? What's going on?" And he didn't want to answer, and he just kept on groaning and everything, and everybody was bothering him, obviously, like, "Yo, bro, why are you groaning so much?" Until he had to tell them. And this is the story that he told them, why he was groaning. He said that he was around in the times of the Baal Shem Tov. I'm just going to go to the next page over here. And he lived in a very far away place, nearly Breslau. He lived in Breslau. Breslau is not Breslov. Breslau was in Germany. So he lived pretty far from the Baal Shem Tov, especially back then. It actually reminds me of a story. There was a guy, also it says in some of the Svarim, that there was a guy who was very interested in Breslov, Hasidim, and he made a mistake and he actually traveled to Breslau. And when he got there, he was like, "Where's all the Breslovers?" And they were like, "You're in the wrong place. You're in Breslau, not Breslov." But anyway, yeah, it sounds similar. But it's not talking about Breslov, the city of Breslov, where Rabbi Nachman started the Chassidus of Breslov in Ukraine. It's talking about a city in Germany. So this guy lived very far away. He lived in Germany, in Breslau. And he heard about the Baal Shem Tov. And he wanted to go to the Baal Shem Tov. And he started going from kfar to kfar, from village to village, from city to city, just so that he can go to the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. And he spent a half a year, Chatzi Shana. It took him a half a year, 6 months, to get from Breslau to Mezhebush. And he thought that when he gets to Mezhebush, he's going to hear everything about the Baal Shem Tov. There's going to be signs about the Baal Shem Tov. Everyone's going to be like, there's going to be a sign, like the Baal Shem Tov with like an arrow pointing towards the Baal Shem Tov's house or whatever he was, But no, he saw the exact opposite. He saw people on the street, and they realized that he was out-of-towner, and they gave him Shalom Aleichem, and they asked him, "Where do you come from, Jew? Me'efo ba Yehudi? Find Vemen is a Yid. Where do you fin Vamen is a Yid?" I don't speak Yiddish. But they asked him, where did he come from? And he said he came from Breslau. And they were very wondrous. They were like, "Why'd you come all the way here?" And he said to them, "I came to the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh." And they all started laughing, Nebuch, and insulting him that he was a meshuggah, that he came so far away just to get to the Baal Shem Tov. And they said on him, these guys said on the Baal Shem Tov, Rachman al-Itzlan. They were saying lies about the Baal Shem Tov and all this sheker. V'nasaloi rabeinov, right? And this was obviously not a good feeling, because this guy heard all about the Baal Shem Tov, and then he comes to the Baal Shem Tov's town and everybody's making fun of the Baal Shem Tov. But Fiafal Pikain Chashav She'elo Nashim has shook. These guys are just regular guys in the marketplace, whatever. They don't really understand who the Baal Shem Tov is. So then he goes inside the Beis Medrash. He sees a Rav sitting there, and he's learning with his students. Again, the same thing. Why are you here? Where'd you come from? He said, "I'm coming to see the Baal Shem Tov." And of course, they also laughed, and they also, of course, insulted him. And they said to him, "You came to the Baal Shem Tov. He does this, he does that, all these different types of sheker." And they spoke a lot of bad about the Baal Shem Tov, Rachman al-Itzlan. And he felt very bad, very angry, because he was Yaga and Tarach. He spent so much time getting to the Baal Shem Tov. And he did not come to the Baal Shem Tov at all. He decided right then that he's not going to the Baal Shem Tov, because he heard from all these people. He heard from the big Misnagdim that the Baal Shem Tov is not who they say he is. And he went back And he went back through village to village, from city to city, Again, another half a year until he came to his house. Ube'emtza derech, and in the middle of the way, he heard that the Baal Shem Tov died. And this is why he was being misanich tamid kol kach. Ki tarach ma'oid shana shleima liris Baal Shem Tov v'vasoif lo roi soimach m'shehem l'divrei ha'misnag. He spent a whole year traveling to the Baal Shem Tov, and he did not, and he was not able to see him. Why? Because he believed in the words of the Misnagdim, Nebuch. And this is why he was crying. This is why he was groaning. V'tzag tamid chaval al de'avdin v'loy mishtachin. And he could not forget it. So this is a lesson that today you have a person who could be a young teenager, and he wants to serve Hashem, and he wants to, really get into it, and he wants to maybe get into Chassidus or whatever, and he goes over to someone that he knows or someone that he trusts. And this could happen to anybody. It's happened to me. And you say, oh, I want to get this safe. I want to learn a little bit about the Baal Shem Tov, a little bit about Rabbi Nachman, a little bit about the Divrei Chaim, a little bit about the Babich Rebbe, any tzaddik. And there's people who will laugh and they'll say, well, what do you want that for? There's nothing there. It's garbage. It's for sick people. It's for people who want to kill themselves. These are all terms that I've heard. I'm not judging anybody, not saying anything, but we have to be very careful. We have to want to go and try our best to get there, to get to wherever you want to get to. Sometimes you have to leave everybody behind and you have to just do it yourself. You have to go to Uman, you have to go to Mezhbush, you have to go places. You want to see the tzaddik, you want to see the caver, go. Don't worry about what anybody else says. Because if your soul is feeling it, that means that there's something there, because the tzaddikim are pulling you in a very strong way. I think they also used to say about Breslov is that Breslov is like a magnet. Breslov is like a magnet. Like you cannot, once Rabbi Nachman starts pulling you in, it's very hard to get away from the magnet. So he continues at the end over here in brackets. It's very interesting, this little zach that he says over here at the end. He says, "Vafilu achshav," even now they don't really understand in Mezhbush the gedulos of the Baal Shem Tov. This is probably talking about back then. So again, also there was still misnagdim. Today, I mean, listen, I just said that there are going to be people who are not going to tell you to go to the Baal Shem Tov, of course, but there are people, most people today will recognize that the Baal Shem Tov was a very, very big tzaddik. But will they tell you to go learn from his Hasidus? Will they tell you to go be a Chassid? Will they tell you to go to his cave? Probably not, but everybody knows today there's not so many misnagdim today as there was back then. It's a different type of misnagdish stuff happening. But back then, there was a lot of misnagdis to Chassidus. And he says that even today, even back then, they did not realize the greatness of the Baal Shem Tov. He says that when somebody would come to Mezhbush to see the Kfarim, he says the Shamish would go to show a person the Tzion of the Baal Shem Tov. The Seder was that they would first be Poigin Baharav Yitzchak Meir, who was the son of the Aptarov. Right? If you go to the Baal Shem Tov's kever, right now it's in a building. Back then it was probably outside of a building, and it's surrounded by other kfarim. So a person who would come, so he would go to the shamash of the cemetery, and the shamash of the cemetery would say, okay, first we're going to see this kever, Rav Yitzchak Meir ben the Aptarov. And then they would show him the actual kever of the Aptarov. And then in the grandchildren of the Baal Shem Tov. And then Rav Baruch, and then Rav Ephraim of Siddichov, and then Rav Wolf Kitzis, Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov. Right? That was the order of how they would get to the Kfarim. And when the Shamish would come, Eitzel, the caver of Rav Yitzchak Meir, Hanal, that we just spoke about, he would say Behislavis Gadol to the person touring there, to the Tayar. Atem yodim mi munach poi. Do you know who's buried there? This is the Rav Tzaddik Rav Yitzchak Meir. And then they would get next page. Then they would get to the Apter and he would say also, wow, the Apter is buried here. And then they would get to the grandchildren of the Baal Shem Tov and the Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, and his voice would start going down, his excitement would start going down. And when he came to the Baal Shem Tov, Niskar legamrei va'omer bekrirus. And here's the Baal Shem Tov. So that whole little zach is very interesting, because why would the Shamish not be interested in the Baal Shem Tov, but he would be interested in the Apter and all the other tzaddikim buried there, because they only came because of the Baal Shem Tov. So, those tzaddikim only exist because of the Baal Shem Tov in the derech of Chassidus. So I don't understand why the Shamish was just when he saw the Baal Shem Tov, he's like, it's the Baal Shem Tov, Chas v'Shalom, the Baal Shem Tov. Also he says in Uman Dafka, there was misnagdim gedolim al Rabbeinu and they also didn't realize the gedulas of Rabbeinu. But now Baruch Hashem, things have changed, and you go to Mezbush and you go to Uman, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people going to the Kfarim for Yeshua's gedolos. But back then it was a different world, and it was like a little bit of a different time. So that's that story. And then now we're going to talk about a little bit of Uman Rosh Hashanah. I think later on this week I'm going to make a little bit of a video about Uman Rosh Hashanah, why, what, how, where. I have for a long time been wanting to make a video on certain tainas that people have on Breslovers who go to Uman, leaving their families and leaving Eretz Yisrael and all that stuff. But for now, I just want to talk about this little pamphlet that I found in the mikveh in Breslov this past Friday in Tzfat. There's a letter that was released from the Ziknei Anash, because this year, as you know, we are in the midst of a pandemic, a world pandemic, and Rosh Hashanah is 2.5 months away, something like that, and nobody knows if we're going to be able to go there this year for Rosh Hashanah. Right now, the border in Ukraine is still closed until this week, and even if that opens up, we don't know if there's going to be enough flights from Israel. We don't know if Americans will be let in. We don't know if you're going to need a test. We don't know if you're going to need to go into quarantine when you get there. If you have to go into quarantine 14 days before Rosh Hashanah, it's going to be very interesting to see people going there 2-3 weeks before Rosh Hashanah and then coming back to Eretz Yisrael and having to spend another 2 weeks in quarantine. There's a lot of questions. A lot of people are nervous. To be honest, it's a little bit intense. I'm not so sad about it yet. I guess maybe when it gets closer. It'll be generally at this time of the year. I probably would even have a ticket. I'd probably book my ticket a few weeks before Rosh Hashanah. But still, if nobody can go, and this is what we have to do, this is what we're going to have to do. You know what I mean? There's nothing you can do about it. We're not here to break any rules. We're not going to try to, sneak through some borders. I'm sure there will be people who will try, and they will be successful. I don't think this year is going to be such a big year. But anyway, the Ziknei Anash today, who are the leaders of Breslov or whatever, they calling for a Yom Tefillah, I think on Erev Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, which is Sunday, I think after next Shabbos, to have a big day of Tefillah, so that we'll be able to be Zaychet to go to Uman. But for now, they release this little pamphlet, and inside there's something to say every day, so that we should be Zaychet that the kibbutz of Rosh Hashanah will happen. And what it is it's Tehillim Perek Pei Dalet. Say Tehillim Perek Pei Dalet 84 every day, and then after you say that, you say Tefillah Ayin Vav in Likutei Tefillos, and then there's a Tefillah from Rabbi Yitzchak Breiter, Hashem Yinkum Davav. He was killed in the Holocaust. He was also a very big Breslover Chassid in Poland, and also that Tefillah is also talking about to come to the Tzion HaKadosh. So I'm going to leave a link in the description where I found the Tefillah online on Facebook from the Breslov people who put it up. There's a certain Indian to say these things now, and hopefully we should be Zaychet to make it to Uman Rosh Hashanah this year peacefully without any issues, so that we can be by the Rebbe for Rosh Hashanah. And hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about that and say some more awesome stories this week. And the main thing is to never give up. Chaim.